When it comes to Rosario, alongside tapping into the first generation American experience and all it takes to make it to America and in America, you also get a reminder that sacrifices are often paid in blood. To summarize the film, Rosario is a first generation Mexican American, is living a dream her parents made sacrifices for, and upon her grandmother's death, she comes to learn what those sacrifices are. And it goes from anything from what her mother went through crossing the border to what her grandmother has literally spilled blood for in order to either save Rosario or potentially curse her for being ungrateful, depending on how you look at it, especially toward the beginning of the film. So getting to the review section, the first highlight for us definitely has to be how it crafts the villain. For when it comes to Rosario, it's not a direct villain in the form of Caballende or something like that. Instead, it feels very much to be all of Rosario's guilt, all of the negative emotions that her mother may have, maybe even her grandma to a certain degree, channeled into one being that is really coercing Rosario to get back in touch with who she is rather than potentially have rejected it in order to come as far as she has gone. And is in watching this demonic figure kind of torture her and test her that you get a real sense of all the suppressed trauma, all the suppressed beliefs, all the suppressed feelings that have surrounded Rosario, and whether she acknowledges them or not, now with her grandmother's death, there's nothing holding them back, and she is coerced to deal with them and not just be Americanized, but fully acknowledge that she's a Mexican American woman. The next highlight for us is that even though we don't necessarily know the lead actress, she was in Shadowhunters, which apparently we watched way back in the day, but since then we haven't really seen her in anything, and even though she's an unfamiliar actress, she was able to pretty much hold this entire film down. And yes, there are people who you surely know, from Jose Jalinga to David, I don't know how to pronounce his last name, but picture's going to be here. You see these men who definitely show up and are playing small supporting roles, but pretty much it's all about the lead actress. And she surprisingly, whether she's dealing with the demonic thing that we just spoke about, or is just trying to figure out how to break this assumed curse that her grandma put on her, she keeps you engaged, she keeps you interested, she keeps you invested in whether she lives or dies, which for any horror movie is the main thing you need to worry about. And I wouldn't say that we are now going to be a fan of hers and we're going to look for anything that she's in, but I do respect the fact that this film is built around her and she handled it as a lead actress should, which leads to the on the fence topic, and it's mainly the cultural aspect. And I'm not talking about the cultural aspect in terms of showing what the parents and grandparents went through in order to come to this country, why they did and stuff like that. More so, I think too, for example, there's this film called Lullaby, which is a horror movie, but it's about the Jewish faith, and it keeps it very balanced. It brings both the good and the bad about the different figures in Jewish faith and how those can be brought into the horror aspect. Now, when it comes to Rosario, yes, her mother and father, Rosario that is Catholic, but her grandmother is part of Palo, or rather is a follower practitioner. I'm not fully sure what the proper wording is for it, but point is, being that this is a faith that is with African roots, mixed in perhaps with some form of Catholicism, there was a part of me that wished that it got a full three-dimensional take on it, where it's not just treated like how voodoo and hoodoo usually are, when it's just this dark magic thing, but instead it would have been nice to see how it brought on community, maybe get a sense that the grandmother did, for lack of a better way, blended white magic or protection magic and stuff like that, rather than it being about curses, sacrifices, stuff like that. Because being that you're probably not going to hear about this faith much after this movie, its only portrayal being something that is very, blood sacrifice, dead animal skulls and stuff like that, a very small part of perhaps of what is a much bigger faith. it feels like it does a disservice. So overall, when it comes to Rosario, while it may not fully do justice to the Apollo faith, and unfortunately kind of gives into a lot of the pitfalls of the horror genre when it comes to showcasing indigenous beliefs, there's no denying when it comes to how it crafts its villain, how it touches upon the culture of not only immigrants, but first generation, people who have benefited from immigrants. Rosario definitely takes a path not often taken in the horror genre and does its best to, even if it sometimes isn't perfect, to try to honor the people who have made a perilous journey in order to give better to their children.